Lucy, welcome to the Risk Management Trade Conference. I'll leave you with your author.
Thank you. Buenos días. Me dijeron que tenía que hablar inglés, por eso preparé todo en inglés. ¿Pero están conectados conmigo? ¿Sí? ¿Me escuchan? Bien. Bueno, so I'll do it in English as they asked me. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucy Pamboukdjian. I've been working for the capital markets in Latin America for the last 30 years. Worked for what you call Bovespa, nowadays B3, for 20 years. And then at the Chilean Stock Exchange, which is now called NUAM, integrating with Peru and Colombia. I worked with new financial market infrastructures, new exchanges that are opening up in Brazil. I'll talk more about this as a consultant in an IT company. And nowadays, I'm the head of capital markets at the Brazilian Association of Listed Companies, Abrasca. And my role here is really to bring some of the lessons learned on the experience of Brazil, how I believe we did things in Brazil that could be replicated in Mexico, and how this effort led us to be nowadays one of the most important global exchanges, and definitely in Latin America, giving a significant improvement in the region. So again, I want this to be a talk, a conversation. So please feel comfortable to ask me any questions. We will have time for Q&A in the last part of the presentation. And I brought some slides just to give you the big picture of how things happened. But now, to start the conversation, I want to show you how Brazil, this is me. I just explained my experience. This is my QR code for LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect, and we keep discussing other ideas further. But most important, this is the picture of the last 25 years or the last 40 years of the stock exchange. Value traded, so all the stocks, how much they trade in Brazil. Let me see if I find the red dots. Yeah. So you see in the 80s, this is like a chart that shows how much of the GDP del PIB represents the total value traded at the exchange. As you can see, in the beginning of the 80s and up until the 90s, the market or the participation of the exchange in the total GDP was less than 10%. Over time, we started growing, and here, importantly, in 1994, there is a new momentum for Brazil with the end of hyperinflation. I'm sure most of you know the story of Brazil with hyperinflation. In 1994, there's a new program that comes out called Plano Real, which is the name of the currency we have today since that time. And this starts a new story for Brazil in terms of macroeconomic environment. And of course, we know if the market, if the macroeconomic environment is not suited or adequate, this wouldn't help the capital markets. You have too much instability, too much volatility, and this doesn't help the stock or the capital markets in general. Here, we start to see a revamp, but what I want to show you is how Brazil got to almost 100% volume traded on the exchange on a yearly level, equivalent to the GDP. This is the story we want to show and maybe address and exchange ideas on how we can do this together. Now, when we look into Mexico, same story, 80s and up until today, Mexico has less than 10% of the total value traded at the stock exchange, representing the GDP. So it's basically, in a comparable term, it's about 10% of what the entire economy represents. And you know the story better for Mexico than I do, right? You know all the implications that we have, all the structure that you have created here in Mexico, and maybe this could give us some hints, some ideas on why Mexico didn't develop the same way Brazil developed. I remember when I started in 1994 at the stock exchange in Brazil, we were part of the Federación Iberoamericana de Bolsas, where Mexico was, and Argentina, and even Spain and Portugal at that time. The volume in Latin America was almost one-third, one-third, one-third. One-third Brazil, one-third Mexico, one-third Argentina. At that time in 1994, when we started having relationship with the exchanges in the region. So I'm bringing Mexico, the second most important exchange of the region, as an example, and will not even mention Argentina or the other markets, because if Mexico is 10%, the other markets are even less than 10%. So there's maybe a story about Brazil. There may be ideas of what Brazil did that can help other markets, and this is what I'm bringing today for the discussion here. Again, as I told you, looking back to Brazil from the same time, we see a development starting. Oh my God, I lost my pointer. Here it is. So we started seeing some development in the 90s, and something happened here in 2000 and 2001. I will tell you what this is. It's not the dot-com problem, not even the Enron problem in the US. It's the devaluación cambial that we had in Brazil. In 1999, the government was still, since the beginning of the Plano Real in 1994 up until early 99, the government was still controlling the FX rate. But at some point, they couldn't control anymore. So we had our own devaluation, our own crisis at that time, similar to the tequila effects that you had here in 1994, or the Russian or Asian or South Asian or Russian crisis that we had in 1997, 1998. So Brazil has its own crisis to be called Brazilian crisis, right? And this brought a big effect to the market. And other macrostructural things also happened that led, that led to this devaluation, and we going from almost 30% representation on GDP to less than 10%. I'll tell you more about this. And then there's a revamp starting again. Then it's a market going down again later in the last decade. And since 2017, 18, the market is going up. I'll explain more. What was the picture we had in Brazil? Maybe I brought some of the ideas because maybe we can correlate with things that are happening here in Mexico. First, we had 8 stock exchanges, so the volumes were very fragmented. You maybe have heard that in Brazil, up until 2000, we had Bovespa, the São Paulo Stock Exchange, Bolsa de Rio, Bolsa de Minas Gerais, Bolsa del Extremo Sur de Brasil. We had 8 stock exchanges. So this didn't help integrated idea or an integrated initiative of development of the capital markets. And the rule was, just to give you a hint of how it was, if a company is based, it has its headquarters closer to Rio, it has to be listed in the Rio Stock Exchange. If it was closer to the south, it had to be listed in the Extremo Sur Stock Exchange. And most companies are not based in São Paulo. So other than being the most developed technologically and maybe the most important exchange at that time already, São Paulo didn't have the most important companies traded there. So we had to do interoperability trading with the other exchanges. But still, this is the picture we had in Brazil. We were just finishing in 2000 a very important privatization program of companies in Brazil. So in 1994, when Fernando Henrique Cardoso, the president at that time, implemented Plano Real and other things that could control inflation and strengthen the currency in Brazil, we also had a program for privatization, Plano Nacional de Desestatización de Empresas. And several companies were privatized, but to do that, we needed to address or bring international investors to Brazil. Up until 1994, international investors were not allowed in Brazil. So this was the opening up of the privatization program that we ended up having in 1994, 5, 6, and 7, 8. And so we were, in 2000, just finishing this successful, very important privatization program that privatized companies, not to the public, not to you and I and people like us, but to international European big companies like Enel or Telefónica or other big companies that went down to Brazil to buy the controlling stake that was of the government for that companies that were very important companies in Brazil. This created an imbalance of the price of the controlling stake that the government got in the privatization and the price that minority shareholders, people that invested like us, invested on those companies in the market at that time. When Telefónica came down to buy Telebras, the national big player of the telecommunication system, the government got 20 times the price that a minority shareholder got for their stocks. And this is because we had an imbalance of stocks with voting rights, and the population in general, investors in general, didn't have voting rights. Only the government had voting rights. So the controlling stake was sold by very good money, but minority shareholders were very damaged in the process of privatization and lost confidence in the market. In 2000, when we went out, I'll talk more about this. We went out to talk to the people about what's your opinion about the stock market. Everybody would say, it's a casino, it's gambling, it's a black box, I don't trust it. I invested in a company in Telebras or one of the privatized companies, and the price that I got is less than what I paid for the shares. You know, it created a very bad momentum for the stock market, generally speaking. And at that time, the 20 ADRs we had in the US, so the big blue chip companies were trading also in the US, the volume traded by 20 stocks in NYSE and NASDAQ were 2 times more than the entire market in Brazil. Solo 20 compañías en Estados Unidos tradeando 2 veces más de lo que todo el mercado brasileño tradeaba o negociaba con casi 500 empresas. So this was a reflect of we don't have a market. And honestly, at that time, a lot of people, experts in the market, even World Bank specialists at that time were very common. They were saying emerging markets like Brazil or Mexico or any other shouldn't have a stock exchange for equities trading. They should focus on government bonds and bonds, fixed income assets, not the equity assets. So it was era muy malo el escenario que teníamos en ese minuto. Inversionistas internacionales or international investors, after privatization and the crisis starting, not only Russia, Southeast Asia, also Brazil, it was a very bad momentum for emerging markets. So international investors were flying to quality assets in their home countries, in the big developed economies. So we didn't have international investors there, but something we just realized at that time. We didn't have enough local investor base. Not retail. Some of the investors that had shares were very damaged in the privatization program, so they were very frustrated and would not come back to the stock market. And the macroeconomic environment was not hyperinflation, but control of assets and everything, and the government was paying 40% clean on bonos de deuda del gobierno. So what would an investor do? Really not invest in the stock market, but rather if they want to invest in Brazil, they would invest in government bonds, not in assets. So this was the whole horrible enchilada we had at that time. And we decided to sit down together, the stock exchange, market participants, other players, the governments, regulators, to discuss alternatives to revamp the stock market. You probably don't see it well because now I'm realizing it's very small. But I compared Brazil and Mexico at the same period. So I'm taking 2000 up until 2004, 99, 2004, 5 years to see the evolution of Brazil and Mexico. You can see for the value of the market capitalization, the entire value of the companies in the market, the numbers in Brazil were very low to 25% of the GDP, whereas in Mexico, it was below 12% of the GDP. Same in the stock value, el monto transado total, compared to the GDP. In Brazil, we were at the lowest value, and same in Mexico. As you see, I don't I don't work well with this pointer, but you probably see here in 2000 the lowest volumes, 2002 the lowest volumes for Brazil and Mexico. So we were the same. We had the same story. That's my point. So horrible times ahead. We decided to plan with all the stakeholders. We sat down and decided to create a project to revamp the capital markets in Brazil. This is not a one-day program, of course. It took several years, but it involved 3 pillars: better access to investors, to brokers, to new assets, better products, so enhance the quality of the shares and other alternatives of investment that we had at that time in Brazil, and better rules. So improving access, products, and rules, we would be able to create confidence and the good environment to attract investors, attract more companies to list there, attract more international players too, and have a, let's say, a level playing field for everybody, because what hurt everybody with the privatization was that some got a better price and some got a worse price. So the confidence was not there anymore. So we needed to start working on that. So we created specific projects to, specific projects to enhance technology and connectivity. This was when we created Home Broker, the access for retail investors to trade at the exchange, and the exchange put money, the brokers put money, looking into attracting retail investors to Brazil. At that time, we had 60,000 investors in the market. So it was very small proportion of the population, of course. There are other elements, the poverty, the financial education, even the literacy. that we had as a problem, but Lula was just arriving as president to with the program Hambre Cero. So we were believing that there was an environment to invest in the participation, to enhance participation of investors to the market. So we created technology. We worked on corporate governance. So we embarked companies to enhance corporate governance and make the Brazilian assets the best in class in terms of corporate governance in the market. This was Enron time when the U.S. was still discussing Sarbanes-Oxley and etc. We were already creating what we call Novo Mercado. It's the best practices of corporate governance that voluntarily companies abide to. Enhancing the quality of brokers, because in the research we did in Brazil with the investors to understand why they wouldn't invest in the market other than say that the exchange is a casino, gambling and all this, they said, I don't trust brokers because they keep my money and I don't know what they do with my money. They just call me next day saying, oh, I bought the share you wanted to buy for this price, but there's no transparency. I don't even know if they really bought the shares or if they took the money for themselves for a couple of days or what they did. So there was this lack of confidence on the brokerage house system too. And we worked on that with the brokers, and we decided to go after international investors. I was specifically part of the teams of financial education, sporadic, but most importantly, I was the head of the international department. So we went out to talk to investors, international investors, about what are you expecting to see in Brazil to make you confident and bring investments again in Brazil. There was a lot of problems that were not from the stock market or the stock exchange. It was part of the government rules and regulation and opening up accounts and all the infrastructure that relates to the participation of international investors. And we got together with the government, the Securities Commission, the central bank, and other players to start cleaning the problems we had in the activity of international investors and ensure that the pipe is clean for them to bring money inflows to Brazil and invest in Brazil. We even got exemption of not capital gains, but exemption of a tax that was on impuesto sobre operaciones financieras that we had at that time that was affecting everybody, but specifically for the stock market. The point is investors, especially international, that want to buy those stocks could buy in the US and pay no impuesto sobre operaciones financieras. So this was part of the conversation we had for months with deputy senator, with the congressman, to explain why exempting the capital, exempting the investors and the capital markets from that tax would be important to keep the national sovereign, let's say, capital markets. So it was a huge program. It was not just 1 or 2 meetings. We're months and years working on that. And we end up having more investors trading at the exchange, more IPOs. We started having IPOs in 2004 after being 6 years without any IPO. IPOs with corporate governance, and the most emblematic company that was the first that did the IPO in 2004 was Natura. You may be heard of this company. Es una empresa de productos naturales de belleza. And they came to the market with the top level quality corporate governance, and this opened up the access of international investors, of brokers, even retail investors, because this brought back the confidence of the stock market, brought back the participation of everybody because stocks were quality stocks. The access, the pipes were clean for everybody to trade again. And we were giving everybody the same access, the same prices, the same conditions, because if one company is listed in Novo Mercado, the best corporate governance segment we have, all the shares have the same price and the same voting rights, just one share, one vote concept, okay? So we started working on this in 2000, and the first company we saw and the volumes started to pick up in 2004. So it took 4 years to start seeing, other than the criticism that we heard in the market, we could do that. And in 2004, also the government exempted Impuesto de Operaciones Financieras from the capital market, which was like Lula government, a left-wing government, exempting the center of the capitalism, the stock exchange, from a tax. That was a very important momentum for us. Results can be seen. This is a picture we have from late 2007. I specifically took a snapshot of this slide because it was the slide that the exchange took out to discuss with investors in the stock exchange IPO, the IPO of the exchange itself. So we were listed, Brazil was listed at that time among the top 10 markets in IPOs worldwide. So NYSE, Shanghai, London, and Hong Kong were the 1 to 4. And Brazil was the 5th stock exchange in terms of volumes through IPOs at that time. And all the companies that were coming were in this listing segment that is in blue here. The 157 new companies that were listing since 2004 up until 2008 were listing in the top segments of corporate governance. So again, enhancing the quality of the asset and cleaning pipes to make it easier for international investors to come. One comment, international investors in the IPOs represented approximately 74% of the volumes in an IPO. And overall, and up until today, international investors represent 60% of the local volumes traded. So it's an important participation of international investors up until today. But again, the story is not finished, right? We still had a lot to do. The first step maybe was done because results were seen 8 years later in 2008. But the crisis in 2008, the prime markets in the U.S. crisis also affected a little bit Brazil, but mostly because international investors were not coming anymore to Brazil. So would we, that was the question at that time, did we create a local investor base enough to sustain what we are going to probably lack from international investors because they are, again, flying to quality and solving their own problems with all the rules and regulations, Dodd-Frank and all the things that happened after the crisis in 2008? Yeah. I mean, we decided in from 2008 and beyond that we had done the first step. We already had 400,000 local investors trading at the exchange. It's not enough, of course, but it was much better than the 60,000 that we had 8 years before. So we did have an important investor base, retail investor, but also pension funds and other fund managers trading in the exchange at that time. And we decided that we had to go into the La Liga, the big play among the big players, because we were already in some statistics one of the top 5 or top 10 exchanges worldwide. So we strengthen international access, especially to derivatives, by signing an order routing agreement with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CME. So this enabled futures traders, big prime brokers in the US and in other markets to trade, also in Brazil. We opened up representation offices in London, New York, and Shanghai to attract and to be constantly talking to international investors. Someone is just pointing me. You were there, or you have a question?
I wonder if this futures
Commodities are not so strong. Not that Brazil is not strong in commodities, but because the prices of commodities and the contracts of commodities are already set in the US, even for corn or ethanol, alcohol that we have in Brazil, mostly are traded overseas. We do have some trade, but the most important players and the most important liquidity is in the US.
But what about coffee?
Coffee. The exporters of coffee sell all their production overseas. So again, even the coffee, Brazil is not a big, let's say, commodities futures player in the world. I mean, it's among the top 10, but it's really insignificant when you see the volumes compared to Chicago Merc or other NYMEX and other exchanges worldwide.
Thanks.
Welcome. So we also invested in co-location because at that time, fast trading, high frequency traders were very important to attract this liquidity of new investors, new international investors to the market. So we enabled them access to put their robots and their machines to trade very close to our matching engine in Brazil. As I said, we opened international operations in other markets and we invested in new products. And I think this is key. I want to address this very specifically because it's not just like big things, macrostructure. There are small things in the microstructure that can help us have new interest and new demand for the assets. And listing ETFs, creating new indices, doing a very strong securities lending program in Brazil, and nowadays even investing or bringing credit instruments, payment system instruments to be traded at the exchange in form of funds is part of the access that enhanced what we see the exchange from 2009 to 2017. And in terms of the still macrostructure, the pipes were even cleaner because we created a faster settlement cycle. In Brazil, we were T+3 at that time. So you bought the shares today and you pay in 3 days and you get them in 3 days. And with the integration of Bovespa, with BMNF and all the other exchanges that were already integrated, we created a strong player that is, instead of having 3 different clearing houses to trade different products, we integrated everything, offsetting collaterals, offsetting margins, and seeing like the investment in stocks as part of the collaterals that could be credited for derivatives trading and etc. So this enabled a broader access and interest of big players and also international investors to the market. So what we have from then on is a market that gets to almost 100% of the liquidity. We had our hiccups too. You probably, I make sure to put some political crisis and the impeachment of the president. We had from 2014 to 2017 a big crisis in, let's say, a confidence crisis and a bad momentum for Brazil at that time. And we ended up, but after that, since 2017, when we had the merger of BMNF Bovespa with CETIP, creating B3, which is now the name of the company, the only stock exchange and infrastructure we have to trade credits and other assets in Brazil. And since then, we are reaching almost 100% of the GDP. So the work, if you look into what the exchange claims that they do nowadays, is this very diverse base of products. You can see here the quantity of products and instruments and access that they created, even market making programs with this retail liquidity provider, new products, Fondo de Inversión Agrícola, which is the name of Fiagro, real estate investment trust, which is a very important instrument that retail investors like a lot. Instead of buying an apartment, they buy real estate investment trust, Bitcoin futures, small cap futures. So this myriad of different products have enabled us to create Brazil, to create this new base of investors. Also, if you look into the numbers, remember I said in the beginning, 2000, we had 60,000 investors. Then in 2008, it was already 300, 400,000. Nowadays, it's 20 million individual investors. These are the numbers that the exchange itself say. More than 20 million individual investors trading fixed income, equity markets, and this is a number that is increasing year by year. So the exchange did all this alone itself? No. We worked on macro structure, on the microstructure of the capital market, and all together with the government, with the brokers, and with the players, stakeholders of the market, we prepared an environment to enhance the capital raising activity, new investors coming, and improving liquidity and the depth of the books for equities, for derivatives, for fixed income, and all the other instruments that we had in Brazil. To finalize everything, I think very important key aspect here. It was not the exchange or the regulators alone. Very important momentum for individual investors to come is when proper environment is set, like fixed income rates are down and there is financial education. But some of the most important brokers invested heavily on having individual investors. They have classes, free classes. They have what we call asesores de inversión, AAI, Asesor de Inversión Independiente. It's the name we use it in Brazil. In the entire country, in the small cities, in the big cities, everybody can invest nowadays, and there's always someone that you can rely on to be your advisor for investments. A lot of retail investors they do day trades. They buy in the morning and sell in the evening, or vice versa. So this is all part of the culture that was created to first save money, el ahorro de capital, then investment, and even small things like don't spend more than 30% of what you get with real estate or your arriendo or whatever you have to pay for housing. And all those concepts are already in the schools. Some organizations like the Federal Association, the National Association of Investment Companies, funds in general, give classes in schools, in public schools, about minimum financial education concept. And some brokers, as I was saying, were part of this big investment on financial education. But this comes together with the big momentum we created in Brazil that comes with regulators as well, like the central bank, for financial education. The bancarization of Brazilians over the last 10 years with Nubank, maybe you heard about Nubank, and other players that are now in the market, has a pivotal effect on the opening up accounts, learning about investments, and then making those retail investors. 20 million people is still only 10% of the population. So we have a lot to work on that still. But definitely we are seeing nowadays those results of this interconnected effort from regulators, from brokers, from banks, digital banks, and other players themselves to bring investors to the market. So financial education and brokers as partners, high quality products, again, corporate governance still plays an important key role in giving confidence, in picking up the confidence of the investors, local or international, in the stocks. We have this closeness to regulation, like sitting together with regulators to work on that and creating very strong infrastructure of capital markets in Brazil is the one that helped everything. And to finish, as you know, it never ends, right? This is a long learning process. It's lifelong learning and working alternative. We have still a lot to work, and now we come to the same party, to the same ballroom. Where are the SMEs? Yesterday I was here listening to some of the discussions you had in the afternoon panels. We don't have the SMEs. The exchanges have the big players, the big companies, the most important companies trading stocks. But the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, las pymes, those that employ maybe 70% of the population, those that in Brazil are individual SMEs, because the entrepreneurship momentum that happened with changes of regulation in 2017 improved this let's say, empowerment of becoming a small enterprise owner for over 150,000 people in Brazil. Those are not part of the capital markets yet. So we still have a lot of lessons to be applied, some things that will be wrong, some that will be correct. But importantly, I expect to come here in a few years to discuss and maybe learn from you how we can work together to make SMEs part of this party. I asked ChatGPT to put this drawing for me with the sharks and with the unicorns. They are all dancing among each other, and we are not being part of their party. Not that they are not included in our party. We are not included in their party. So how can we work closer to them and put them as an important stakeholder to the game, and understand that they will not accommodate themselves to be in the same rules that we trade for big companies, but on the contrary, how can we fix things to be a proper environment to attract SMEs to the market? So with that, I finish thanking you for the opportunity, thanking Alan and Riskmatics to be here. Again, my contact, and we have questions, I suppose, because I can see here my friend Alonso.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank-
Really so interesting what we are looking now about all this process of change. More than a question, I would like you to summarize, and also whether you want to make it in Spanish, si prefieres, te sientes más cómoda, lo puedes hacer en castellano. Habla perfecto castellano Lucy Pamboukdjian. ¿Cuáles serían esa integración, esos factores clave de que van a permitir en un momento dado la evolución? Porque no solamente estás al día de lo que está sucediendo en Brasil y en todas las bolsas de Sudamérica, también en la de México. ¿Cuáles serían esos factores clave que pueden permitir ese cambio, esa evolución y el aprovechar la oportunidad que estamos viviendo?
Sí. Hablando específicamente de dos, yo diría, primero, que nos sentemos, reguladores y participantes del mercado, todos juntos a discutir qué podemos hacer, dónde queremos llegar y cómo nos repartimos trabajo. Porque es muy fácil Yo desde mi punto de vista, ay, es que la bolsa no hace nada. O la bolsa que se siente y diga, bueno, esto no es un problema mío. Buscar o prospectar inversionistas es un problema de los corredores. Esto no va a funcionar. O nos sentamos juntos en la misma mesa y nos ponemos de acuerdo en, no nos vamos a poner de acuerdo en todos los temas, pero sí nos vamos a poner de acuerdo en lo que es core.
Reguladores,
Reguladores, operadores,
y-
bolsa
y las
y las empresas, los
susceptibles de entrar al mercado.
Exactamente. Y lo otro es dar espacio a la innovación financiera. Ayer escuchaba lo que decían algunos paneles, tener ese espacio para crear, para simplificar, para hacer más expedito el mercado a través de la innovación es fundamental. Fue en Brasil, sea con las historias de las casas de bolsa que pudieron traer inversionistas, sea por la historia de Nubank y otros bancos digitales que pudieron atraer y hoy tener cerca de 80% de la población bancarizada. Hace 10 años éramos 35% de la población nomás. Entonces, es un esfuerzo colectivo para abrir la cabeza y pensar la forma de...
Importante ese factor, la bancarización plena de toda la población.
Exacto,
No dejarlo fuera.
no dejarlos.
Y obviamente, eso es una regla de competencia, hazlo fácil y la rivalidad hará lo demás.
Exacto, así es.
Un fuerte aplauso.